Hey, I'm Greg Atkinson. I am the founder of the First Impressions Conference and a consulting company called Worship Impressions, where we work with churches around the country. And I'm excited to be a part of this online conference. Um, my topic is First Impressions when we reopen. And so if you've ever come across any of my writing or podcast or engage with me online or through Facebook, you know I'm passionate about hospitality, guest services, first impressions. And so sooner or later, we as the scattered church are going to gather back together. And so I wanted to share some thoughts on that. You know, I've been thinking lately about First Chronicles 12, where it talked about the men of Issachar, or men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. I'm no expert on the coronavirus. None of us are. We've never been through a global pandemic before. But I do know first impressions, and I know hospitality, and I know some basic principles and practices that I think were relevant pre-COVID and are going to be relevant post-COVID. I wrote about them in my book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper. Also, my brand new book, Hospitality Handbook for Volunteers. And I'm just passionate about hospitality. That's my heart. That's my passion. Um, in my books, I talk about that the Bible teaches us to welcome the stranger. It's a biblical mandate. Hospitality is a biblical mandate. And so when I talk about guest services and welcoming and hospitality, I often talk about loving your neighbor. And right now, in the world that we find ourselves in here, it's 2020, in this coronavirus season, which they say is going to be cyclical and will come back in the fall and the winter. And so we're going to be here for a while until there's a vaccine. But what does loving our neighbor look like? For me, I think it's giving them some space. I think it's social distancing. I think it's not initiating touch. I think it's respecting their boundaries. And so when you come back together, it's going to be a great day. I miss church, the gathering of our local congregation. I was watching a worship video recently on YouTube, and I could hear the congregation. I could hear the crowd singing, and I thought, man, I miss that. I miss that. I miss interacting with people. I'm a people person. That's why I love guest services and first impressions. I like hugging people. I like shaking hands. I like fist bumping. I like high fiving. But we right now in this season, loving our neighbor looks like giving them space. Social distancing is going to have to stick around until there's a vaccine, because people, regardless of their immune system or age or whatever, they are vulnerable and could catch this illness. And we want to be wise and be good stewards of the opportunity to meet together again and to protect people, especially the most vulnerable among us. That goes right in line with hospitality. And so when it comes to rolling stuff out, I think churches will start doing things in small groups, almost like house churches, where maybe the restrictions, it's going to vary across the nation and across the world, you know, from state to state, where they say maybe 10 people, only 10 people or more, or groups of 50 or groups of 100. And so as it rolls out, I've been talking with church leaders around the country about having small groups, house churches meet in homes, groups of 10 people, and then finding a little bit larger avenues or venues where 50 people could gather together. But if you're a church of 500 or a church of 1,000 or a church of 5,000, it's going to be a long time before you can get together in the same building all at once safely. And so we want to be smart about how we roll things out and how this plays out over time. But eventually we will get there. We will get there and we will be back together. And so that's what I want to focus on. What does first impressions and hospitality look like when the scattered church becomes the gathered church again and we are all back together? And so when people usually for the most part come across your church, as I talk about in Secrets of a Secret Shopper, the first chapters on online presence. Most of the time, people will come across you online before they ever step foot on your physical campus. And so we know that. We've talked about that. If you're watching this summit, you're pretty savvy and you're aware that people check you out online before they ever come in person. And so right now in this coronavirus season that we've been in for the last 6-8 weeks, it's been crazy that so many people have had an opportunity to engage with us and to connect with us and to visit us online. And so we have learned a lot. I've seen churches that are sprinting and scrambling and stretching and growing and doing all they can to provide digital resources and streaming and Facebook Live and YouTube Live and church online platform and all this stuff that churches are doing, and chat features and hosts and great things that are happening. We want to continue that. We want to keep that. And so when the church comes back together physically, don't stop the online side. Don't stop the digital side. It's a both and world from here on out. This is the new normal. We're going to be gathered together physically in a building, knowing that people are watching us online. And so it's going to be pretty cool. Now, once we get past the house church small group phase, some of the things I'm hearing from around the country is some churches are looking at starting back up with drive-in churches. There are states and cities now where they're prohibited and they're discouraged. And honestly, I wasn't a big fan of them at first because I didn't want to get into policing people and telling people they have to stay in their cars and they can't go to the restroom in the church. And I'm sorry your kids got to pee, but we can't open the doors to the church. And so it was a little gray area. But as we open back up, it might be a good first step to meet in a drive-in scenario before you open the doors of the church up and you have to disinfect and clean and sanitize everything. And so maybe churches start out with the FM transmitters and they start out with the drive-in service in phases when we start being able to meet here in May and June and July and August as things start coming back. But once we get back to church kind of like we used to know it, but remember, this is the new normal. Then as my book talks about, we go from online virtual experience to the parking lot. And so I want to just walk you through here on this online summit, this online conference, from the street to the seat. What does first impressions look like in the new normal? And so if I come driving into your church, if I come driving into your parking lot, I would like to see happy, friendly faces in the parking lot. I've said this for years, smiling and waving. And a great thing that people can do now, I don't have an example of one, but if you've ever seen like a pop sign, signs that people hold that say, "We're so glad you're here," or "Welcome home," or imagine if you had some printed up that said, "Welcome back." As I come walking up to your church, having people hold signs that say, "We're glad you're here," "Welcome back," "Welcome home," that is good for a lot of reasons. One, it's a great first impression, but also it gets my hands tied up so I can't reach for you and I can't grab you, and it gives me kind of a boundary because I'm holding a sign. But I would, and I've got those. I've used signs from Pop Signs and from Radiant Printing and from Church Ink. They all have great products out there like that. But when people come back, chaos is going to freak them out. And so starting in the parking lot, if there's chaos, that's going to freak people out. And so if your parking team has never taken parking seriously before, it's time to do some training. You can go to firstimpressionsconference.com and look through 3 different conferences of archives and find training on parking and ushers and greeters and welcome team and all that. But this is the time to gather together even virtually through Zoom. I'm recording this webinar right now through Zoom, and so maybe you gather together and you do some coaching and you do some training and you watch some videos together as a team. It's a great time to grow together here in this kind of off season as we get ready to launch. And so, I don't want to see chaos when I come to your parking lot. That's going to freak me out. I want to see order. I want to see clarity, and I want to see direction. And so guide people where to park, where to safely park. If you have guest parking, make sure guests know where to park. So focus as a leadership team, as leaders and pastors, focus on systems and processes and protocols, and what is it going to be like here in the new normal to keep people safe and healthy. If this thing spikes again, if we get sick again, then we're back to not being able to meet together. So we've got to be wise, and we got to keep each other safe and healthy. And so, so signs are great. I would hold up some signs and let that kind of take my hands so I'm not reaching and grabbing. So once I come walking up the sidewalk and I come to the front doors of your church, I want to see greeters that open the front door and hold the door open for me so I don't have to touch surfaces. I don't have to touch handles. I don't have to reach for the door handle and open it up, not knowing if it's a clean or dirty or how many hands have touched the door handle. And so it's the same concept inside. When I walk into the auditorium or sanctuary or whatever you may call your worship center, when I walk in, somebody should be holding the door open and allowing me to walk through without having to reach and hold and grab a handle. But give people space as they walk up, hold the front doors for them. Maybe, I don't know, maybe your ushers and greeters should be wearing gloves. There's talk about getting the gloves like you would see a nurse wear. If somebody's coming to like take blood, the little medical surgical gloves that you can find around. Maybe or just gloves in general, something where it's not skin to skin contact in case you are passing out a bulletin or handing a bulletin. Maybe now is the time to sit bulletins. Maybe now is the time not to print a bulletin. I've seen that going around online on Facebook. If you were to print a bulletin or a worship guide, maybe you just set it on the table and let people pick it up. That's probably not the best idea. I just wouldn't print one. I would do everything digital, everything online. But give people space as they walk up. And then once we get into the auditorium, so greeters are going to have a role of welcoming and setting the tone and calming people and holding doors open for people and not running in and bear hugging and shaking hands. I'm telling you, friends, you've got to love your neighbor. You have got to give them space. If I come to your church and you touch my hand, I am not going to come back because I've been sick for 4 weeks personally. I'm just getting over this. I don't want to get sick again. No, none of us want to get sick. None of us want to catch this. Even put coronavirus aside, flu season is coming. We don't want to touch stuff. That's why back in my Facebook group, I was talking about Fist Bump February, way back in February. Back when the last flu season was, and we're coming up on another flu season in the fall and winter. But so greeters, hands off. Don't touch. I know we're people. That's why we're on First Impressions team. That's why we do guest services. That's why we do hospitality. We love hugging. We love shaking hands. We love greeting, but we got to give people space. Ushers, you have a very important role. I have joked for years that ushers usually don't usher people to seats. Ushers usually don't do their jobs. In all of my traveling and all of my consulting and working with a couple hundred churches across North America, what I have found is a lot of ushers don't usher. And so if I come to your church, there's a quote in my last book, Hospitality Handbook for Volunteers. If your ushers can be replaced with the table, it means they're not doing it right. And what I was talking about was if your only job that your usher does at your church is hand a bulletin, that's not ushering. You can take the bulletins and stick them on the table and people can walk by and pick up their own bulletin. Ushering is seating people. So in this new normal, however the guidelines are in your state, maybe we have to social distance. Maybe everybody has to be 6 feet apart. Maybe an auditorium of 200 is only allowed to have 50 people in it at once. Maybe we have to add services. This is a real reality. Maybe we're going to have multiple services this is for all churches of all sizes. And maybe they're going to have to be spread out in different corners of the auditorium where they have to keep a distance. Maybe this is regulated. Maybe this is just wisdom. Maybe this is guidelines given to us from federal or state or local government. But ushers are going to have to usher. And so you may have to rope off seats. You may have to use stanchions. You may have to use pipe and drape. You may have to ushers. I've been to a lot of concerts and symphony and orchestra and stuff where ushers are wearing gloves. It actually can look neat, can look fancy, but might help people feel a little bit more at ease. But you want to kind of point people to where they can see it. And you're going to have to map that out. I don't know what your auditorium looks like, but in your auditorium, to keep people safe and to keep people, maybe a pew, every other pew, however you sit them, however you do that, your ushers are going to have to handle that. Ushers are going to have to, you're going to have to talk through as a leadership team. Do we pass the plate? I wouldn't. Do we pass the offering plate? Do we do communion? I wouldn't. Do we serve coffee? I wouldn't. Do we serve refreshments if we used to serve refreshments? The restrictions on that, the guidelines, the protocols, the procedures, the sanitation, the regulations are going to be so strict, it's probably not worth it. Just take a break from coffee and refreshments for right now, unless you're just going to go overboard and you have a lot of medical people in your community and people that are going to go to the next level. But you've got to do everything you can to make people feel at ease, which is at the heart of hospitality. What I've talked about for years is making people feel at ease, removing roadblocks and barriers and obstacles, making people feel at home. And so once we get in your building, it needs to have been clean, disinfected, sanitized, whether you have a volunteer team or you have janitorial staff, your entire building, doors, surfaces, windows, welcome center, pews, everything has got to be wiped down, clean, disinfected, sanitized. You've got to go over the top with cleanliness. I talk about this in this book. I talk about the sense of smell, but you've got to. They were just saying on the news last week how powerful disinfectants and bleach were against the virus. So you've got to use disinfectant and bleach, and you've got to keep your place spotless and clean and safe for people. Safe right now equals love. Safe equals love. And so love your neighbor, give them space, keep them healthy. And so having your ushers seat people is going to be a big deal. One idea that a lot of churches are talking about is having assigned seating like some movie theaters across the nation. You ever go to a movie theater and you pick out your seat online digitally and you say, we're going to sit in E6 and E7? A lot of churches are talking about doing that. I've seen talk in my Facebook group about churches that are using Eventbrite and iTickets, things like they would do for a Christmas concert or a Christmas musical or performance or a passion play. If your church does a big Christmas event and you've done ticketing before, this is the time to bring it back. If you want to keep people separated out, tickets will be pretty powerful right now. That's something I would get behind and like to see. But every door, every surface, every pew, every classroom, welcome center, everything disinfected, clean, sanitized. Once we get in the service, your host is going to be very important. Whoever comes up to do the welcome and announcements needs to be a sense of humor, friendly, engaging, calming. Hey guys, isn't it awesome to be back? Nobody's going to grab you. Nobody's going to approach you. Nobody's going to touch you. We're just glad to be together again, worshiping our great God and Savior and King. But whatever fits your context best, your host, your person that gives the welcome is going to set the tone for the day. Host, worship leader, lead pastor, teacher. When you're up there now, remember you also have an online audience of people that have been watching you for weeks and for months that are still watching. Maybe they're not ready to come back yet. Maybe they live in another state. Maybe they're watching, but they've never crossed into a physical church before. maybe they started watching during this crisis, but they haven't physically visited your church yet. There's hope. They may, but maybe they're still watching online. Please, whatever you do, don't get rid of your online service. This is both and. My friend Jeff Reed calls it phygital, a physical and digital world, physical and digital world. And so, yes, when we gather back together, it's going to be awesome, but there will still be people watching online. There will still be people live streaming and watching. And so hosts, worship leaders, pastors, when you're preaching, remember, if you ever watch Craig Rochelle at Life Church, he's staring right down the barrel of the camera. He's looking at the camera the whole time. And so you have an online audience that is watching now. We are in a new normal, a new reality where there are people in the room and people at their home watching on their phone or mobile device or tablet or iPad or television. They're watching you through Roku, through YouTube, through Facebook Live. They're watching your church. And so we want to welcome them. So as we talk about first impressions and hospitality and welcoming, I want to say, hey, welcome to everybody that's here today. If you're visiting for the first time, we're so glad you're here. And if you're part of our online campus, we're glad you're watching, glad you tuned in. Welcome everybody, include everybody. This is the new normal. And so the hosting is very important. Welcome announcements. I would not offer a meet and greet, a fellowship time. So when you have somebody come up and do a welcome and announcements, let's not right now, and I talk about this even pre-coronavirus and flu season, let's not do a meet and greet. Let's not do a fellowship time. Let's not say turn and meet your neighbor. Please, 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 please. Let's not do that right now. Let's just be wise. Let's not do that right now. And so your host is going to kind of moderate and control that. And then you want to coach your overeager greeters and ushers to not initiate handshakes and hugs and high fives and things that we are so used to. This is going to be hard. It's hard for me. I'm a hugger. This is going to be hard. But loving our neighbor right now means giving them space. Safe equals love. Love equals safe. And so let's keep people safe and healthy. One of the elephants in the room is children's ministry. Children's ministry is going to be a nightmare at first. How do you social distance first graders? When you get a classroom of 20 kids, how do you keep them 6 feet apart? Remember, there is no vaccine yet. It's still out there. So how do we keep kids under control? Maybe at the beginning, you don't start back with children's ministry. Maybe it's the drive-in service. Maybe it's online, house church, drive-in, and then you meet in groups of 50 or groups of 100 or groups of 200, and it grows and you're meeting together as a family. Maybe it's a while before we open back up children's ministry. But when you get 20 kids in a classroom and they're interacting and playing and touching and hugging, and it's going to be scary. And so if you're not already, find a children's ministry Facebook group to get in and to learn from. We talk about it in my group, my weekend worship and guest services Facebook group, but there are others that are dedicated specifically for children's ministry. This is something I'd be keeping an eye on right now. So maybe you don't do that initially, but you as leaders have got to think through things like this. Again, do we serve coffee? Do we serve refreshments? Do we pass the offering plate? Do we do communion? So offering, we need money. We need money to operate. We need money to meet the vision. I get that, but there are other ways to collect money. And so one of the things I've been a proponent of and talking to people about is obviously online giving, text to give, but you can have a giving box out in the lobby, in the foyer, in the hallway, in the giant community space. You can have these boxes that say, drop your Connect card and offering, tithes and offering here. And there's several models online. You can find it. I think Displays to Go has some, but you can find it online where people come by and they drop their check or their tithe or their offering or their connection card. So you as leaders have got to think through stuff like this, but I would have a giving box and I would mount it in the lobby. I would use this to pivot and to switch into digital, and moving people to online giving and text to give. And there's a lot of great options. Obviously, I love Text and Church and what they're doing. And Text and Church, not only can you do a variety of things on there, but I would do some kind of digital online connection card, because finally, as I wrap up, I just want to talk about following up with your guests. You want to follow up with your guests online that are watching your services online through an online connection card, and then in the service, whether you have a physical, tangible, I've got one around here somewhere, a connection card that people hold up and they turn in and stick in the box. Because again, we don't want to be passing plates right now. People don't want to touch a plate that's been passed by somebody else. Trust me, they don't want to do that. But when we engage with guests and say, you know, hey, we'd love for you to fill out a connection card. We have a gift for you. Maybe that's digital now for a season going forward. I'm a fan of both and, but right now maybe we want to push more towards a digital connection card. And I've written some blogs that you may find helpful at my website, gregatkinson.com. One of them talks about what your homepage should look like right now during this season, and then I also talk about online connection cards, and that there's a lot of samples in the Weekend Worship and Guest Services Facebook group of online connection cards, but maybe those are used right now, which you can log in from your phone. I've got my phone somewhere around here. You can log in from your phone and fill out the connection card online, or you can text "I'm new," whatever your system is. But you want to still the same concept of gathering information, gathering data, and then following up with guests to make a connection with them, because it's all about helping people take their next step. So right now in this digital world, physical and digital, we're helping people take their step, whether they're watching online at home or at work or in their car listening, or they come to our campus and they're there physically. We want to help people take their next step. And so pastors, remember, you have an online audience watching you now at home. And there may be some of your very own core people that just aren't ready to come back yet. And so don't forget about them. Welcome them. Make them feel at home. Let them know you still love them, still care about them. And we can do this. We can do this. We've just got to welcome the stranger and love our neighbor and give people space. We're going to get back. We're going to be meeting together, but let's give people space. Let's be wise. Let's be wise, like the Bible says, wise as serpents. And again, I think of the men of Issachar in First Chronicles. They understood their times and knew what to do. And so pray through, as you watch this online conference, as you think through all the speakers and all that's going on, as you meet. There's a resource on my website, gregatkinson.com, about top questions you need to ask your congregation before you reopen. And it's basically encouraging you to do a congregational survey to ask questions to your congregation about when they feel ready to meet again. And so I'm praying for you. I wish you well. And let's welcome all. Thank you.